Transplants are either living donor transplant or deceased donor transplant. The living donor transplant, where the kidney donor is a live person, usually it can be done either after the patient starts on the dialysis, or it can be done preemptive when your kidney function with the GFR is less than 15. You can straight away go for the transplant instead of going on dialysis. And it has a shorter wait time. You don't have to worry for the cadaver donor to come, and you don't have to be on the wait list. Whereas deceased donor transplant is the one when the patient is on the wait list. When there is a brain dead cadaver donor comes, as per your turn, you get a kidney. The benefits of living versus deceased donor, if you see, the deceased donor has certain complication. It is done in emergency, whereas in living donor, it lasts, have a low risk of rejection. It allows better overall health, and it can be done empty. The diet restriction, health complications are less, and of course you don't have to wait too long on dialysis because the donor is the family. So once you are having end-stage kidney disease, how do you go about transplant? So first, when there is a GFR falls below 15, if the living donor is available, you can straight away go for the transplant. If you don't have a living donor, then you go on dialysis, register yourself on the waiting list, and once the deceased donor is available, you go ahead and go for the transplant. The wait time can be up to 8 years. The criteria for cadaver donor selection is the donor has to be brain dead. The renal function of the deceased donor should be good, appropriate, should not be any kidney disease. There should be any pre-existing kidney disease like malignancy or infections or tumor or stone or anything. There should not be any other transmissible disease like other virus or any other malignancy. The blood group of the donor will be matching you, and the cross of the donor with the patient should be. And, HLA cross match if possible. Nowadays, even in India, the cadaver donor we are doing with HLA cross match possible, and particularly if you have a match, it's very good. Patient selection for the kidney transplant is when all patients, the ESRD, those who are having end-stage kidney disease, are the candidates for the transplant. Unless some diseases like if they have a cancer, if they have a chronic infection which are not treatable, if they have a severe heart problem, or if they have a severe neuropsychiatric problems, then it is not recommended. As you can see, we have a procedure in which we don't remove the original kidney. The native kidneys are placed on by both the sides of the spine on the back side of the body, and usually they are kept as it is. They are not removed. They are removed only if they have some disease, like if they have infection, if the polycystic kidney with pus, or if they are too huge, or if there is a reflux in the kidney, or if there is a malignancy. Otherwise, usually the diabetic kidney or the chronic glomerulonephritis, these kind of kidney diseases, the native kidneys are not removed. They are kept as it is. And the third kidney is transplanted into the right iliac fossa, just below the navel, the right side. And it is anastomosed with the iliac vessels. That is, these arteries and veins are joined, and the urine pipe is joined to the urine bladder. When it comes to the donor, what we should look for, the living related donor, the donors are of three types: either living related donor, living unrelated donor, or cadaver donor. In the living unrelated donor is not allowed, and it is like if patient has genuinely having near relatives not possible to donate, then there are certain procedures by which the government ethics committee can approve for the emotionally related or unrelated donor. And in cadaver donor, we have two types. One is beating and non-beating donor. Beating, heart beating donor means the patient is only brain dead, but the cardiac function is still there. Whereas non-heart beating donor is where the brain is also dead, but along with the patient also has a no cardiac function, no cardiac activity, and it has to be done within 30 minutes of the death. And usually in India, it is still not done. It is only the heart beating donors only are preferred. Living donor, we have to have blood relative as a donor. It should be highly motivated, And if possible, blood group should be matching. Blood group not matching also is possible, but the cost is high, and there is a procedure which we have to follow. So either blood group compatible or not compatible is possible, and HLA identical is better, but HLA matching is also not hard and fast. It can be non-match also. So when a donor is evaluated, what are the things which we have to look? Whether donor has any medical condition which will complicate his general anesthesia status for the surgery, then we should avoid that donor. Whether the removal of the kidney will increase the donor's risk for developing renal insufficiency is the one very important thing which we should look for when we are selecting a donor. If there is any such condition, we cannot take him as a donor. When we are checking for the donor, the routine tests done are creatinine clearance, GAR estimation by identified analysis in culture, and after all other cardiac and other conditions are very well evaluated before we consider any donor as a fit for kidney transplant. Other medical conditions also should be like cardiac condition and other risks also we have to see, risk for anesthesia we have to see, and any history of recent malignancy or past malignancy also we have to see. And of course, chronic diseases, we should not consider him as a donor. Does donation of a kidney pose a long-term risk to the donor? Is the question which were very commonly asked by most of the donors. And as I said, once an nephrectomy is done, the other kidney gets some compensatory hypertrophy. It increases in size, and there is some increase in the GFR also after the remaining kidney is in the remaining kidney. There is a very mild risk of protein in the urine or blood pressure which increases, so we have to monitor that. But overall meta-analysis of almost more than 20 years of so many donors was done, and it was confirmed that it is very safe to donate a kidney once it is medically been approved that this donor is medically fit and it's not going to have any future problem. So once the doctor makes him fit, then it is less likely that in long term he would have any complication. Contraindication for the renal transplant, there are so many contraindications which are listed in this, like ABO incompatible, which is a past contraindication. Nowadays, it is not considered a contraindication. Then cytotoxic antibodies against HLA antigen. Again, this was a contraindication in the past, but now with the recent newer advances in the medicine, newer advances in the medical science, even patients who are having sensitized or HLA antibodies, we can transplant them. Recent metastatic malignancy is still a contraindication. Active infection is a contraindication. AIDS again is not a contraindication. You can treat and keep the viral load under control, and you can transplant. Severe extrarenal diseases like a very bad heart or a liver cirrhosis, or then that will be a contraindication unless you do a combined liver kidney or combined cardiac. So these kind of possibilities are still possible, but otherwise it is a contraindication. Active vasculitis or active glomerular disease is a contraindication. If you feel that patient is non-compliant to medicine, that is a very big complication, and that can lead to a major rejection. So that is a contraindication. So non-compliance, motivated patient is very important. Psychiatric illness, morbid obesity, age above 70. Again, these are relative contraindications. These are still treatable and can be considered for the transplant if they are medically well treated. Primary oxalosis was again a contraindication in the past, but now no more. Coagulation disorder, again, no more a contraindication. These are still treatable and can be taken for primary oxalosis. You can do a combined liver and kidney, and it is possible. So the medical science has advanced so much now that almost 50% of the diseases which were initially thought that they are not fit for transplant are still now can be considered for the transplant. How do you match between the recipient and donor? There are three types of matches. One is HLA match, second is a tissue match, and third is a blood group match. So HLA match is very important, wherein there are two types of HLA antigen, class 1 and class 2 antigen, which are there on the chromosome 6. Better the match, better is the long-term graft survival, and less is the requirement for the immunosuppression. And second important matching is the cross match of tissue, that is by the donor lymphocyte versus recipient serum. So even if you have a zero match in HLA, but if you are tissue match, that is lymphocyte cross match, if it is negative, we can do a transplant, and a very successful transplant is possible. But if you have a cross match which is positive, then it is not possible to do a transplant. And usually if you have done a lymphocyte cross match maybe about 2 months or 3 months prior, then it is always better to do a cross match immediately prior to transplant, because you can have preformed antibodies in between if you have blood transfusion or some infection with viruses. So last final cross match is mandatory. And third matching is a ABO match. ABO match, if the same group donor is there, it is always better. If you have across the blood group, like if you have O group and if a donor is A, in past it was not possible, now it is possible with certain treatment and plasma therapy, we can do the transplant without blood group match. Most important is a B cross matching, whereas HLA and blood group cross match is not now mandatory. So this is the picture of HLA, how it looks, HLA. So as you can see, why it is important to have a HLA match is there is lot of study and lot of registries which have been long-term been studied, and it has come to the conclusion that better is the match, better is the graft survival, and the benefit of lesser degree of matching have been less obvious with the use of newer immunosuppressions. With newer drugs, it is now possible to do unmatched kidney, but survival would be definitely different if you have a good match. As you can see in this graph, if you have a zero mismatch, that means you have a full house match, your chances of survival of that kidney is much higher compared to the total mismatch, whether you are using drugs or without drugs. Better the match, better is the survival, better is the function. Lower is the match, lower is the function. So that's why HLA match is very, very important, and in particular DR match is the most important factor. What are the other factors which influence the longevity of renal graft? Other than HLA match, age is the most important, age of the donor, age of the recipient, whether you have any delayed graft function, like after transplant because of some reason there is a hypotension, ATN, or if the cadaver donor was already having some hypotension and delayed graft function, that can affect your longevity of the renal graft. Ischemia time, after removing the kidney, if it is transported from one place to other place, or if it is to be kept outside for a longer time, then longer the ischemia time, it can influence the longevity of renal graft. Number of acute rejections, immediately after transplant, if the graft functions well and if there is no rejection episode, the kidney will continue for very long term. But if you have any rejection episode, it will affect the survival of long-term survival of the graft. What is your native kidney disease also is very important for the long-term graft survival, because certain kidney diseases like glomerulonephritis, they can come back into the new kidney, and then that can affect the long-term survival if there is a recurrence of the basic disease. Ethnicity, again in the African Americans, the disease having hypertension, PTTM, dyslipidemia, all these complications, and long-term survival is less as compared to the Hispanics. The common problems which we face after transplant, the most one important is rejection, but with newer immunosuppression and newer induction therapies available, newer matches available, the rejection chances have gone down very, very less. What we say initially, when we had not these fancy drugs, the rejection rate was 20 to 25%. But with newer drugs now, we see rejection rate as low as 6% or less than that. The other important thing is surgical complication. Surgical complications like urine leak, ureteric complication, vascular complication, wound healing complication. These are the complications which can occur immediately post-transplant, which are called surgical complication. Then infections. Infections can come from within. Usually when you are given immunosuppression, there are so many viruses, bacteria which are there in our body which are dormant. And when our immunity goes down, significantly down, these bacteria which are there inside our body, they start flaring, and this is what is called opportunistic infection. That means these bacteria which are dormant in our body, they start multiplying and then they cause infection. So the commonest infections which we see, which are opportunistic, are cytomegalovirus, BK polyomavirus, tuberculosis in India. This is very common. Post-transplant diabetes mellitus, this is because of the drugs. So those patients who did not have diabetes in the past develop diabetes either because of the steroid, tacrolimus, cyclosporine. So they can have a diabetes which may be a short lasting for 3 months or 6 months, but few, around 18 to 20% can develop a diabetes which is for the long term. Malignancies are the complication of the transplant and the immunosuppressive drugs, which is seen usually after a long-term transplant of 10 years or so. We can rarely see it at early stages of 1 year or 2 years, but it is more common in the later stages of the transplant. And systemic diseases like other cardiac diseases, dyslipidemia, bone diseases, these are other complications of the transplant which we can come across. The complications which are seen immediately post-transplant are rejection and ampular necrosis, and long-term complications which we see are the drug complications like toxicity of the drugs, urological complications, de novo glomerulonephritis, that is a previous kidney disease coming back into the new kidney. So these are the long-term complications, whereas the rejection and acute tubular necrosis are the immediate complication of the transplant. The major causes of long-term allograft failure is chronic rejection. So the kidney slowly starts swelling and the creatinine slowly starts creeping. This is because of the preformed antibodies or donor-specific antibodies or drug-related complications which can cause chronic rejection. Or the other most common complication is the death with functioning graft. So you have normal kidney function, but death is because of some other reason like cardiovascular disease or infection. This is the most common cause of death with functioning graft. Either you have a myocardial infarction or you have arrhythmias or infections which are fatal. The mortality after kidney transplant, like what is your survival chances? The survival of patient after transplant from living donor is 98% at 1 year and 91% at 5 years. This is a world statistics which is seen from the most of the registry. And survival of patient who have received cadaver donor, it is 95% at 1 year and 81% at 5 years. So it is a very, very good survival rate. With newer and newer therapies which are available, newer and newer technologies, the drug reduction regimes, the survival has increased significantly. If we see comparison of dialysis versus transplant, what is the survival? The annual mortality of patient under dialysis is around 21 to 25%, which is around 1 year, around after 120 patients will die. But in transplant, if it is transplant, 8% is with the cadaver donor and 4% with the living relate. So significant difference between the dialysis and transplant. And in healthier patients under the transplant patients usually are healthier and usually young age. So that may be the little bit of selection bias is there, why they are more having longevity. But even if we take out this bias, still the survival is much better on the transplant. And if you see, this benefit is more significant in diabetic patients. So if a diabetic patient between the age of 20 to 40, if patient is on dialysis, his chances of survival is 8 years versus transplant, it is 25 years. In non-diabetic, it is 20 versus 30. But in diabetic, it's 80 versus 25. So the diabetic patients are much more benefited with transplant, because we always have that fear, diabetic patients, that whether transplant is possible for me or not. So in fact, diabetic patients are more benefited with transplant as compared to non-diabetic patients. This is a very good survey which is done on thousands of patients, and this is the survival which is seen. If you see survival in dialysis, it is around 60% as year on year goes by. But for patients who are on cadaver transplant, it is around 70%. And living donor kidney transplant, it is almost 90%. So dialysis is inferior to cadaver and cadaver is inferior to living donor. At all age group, again, if you see, this is dialysis and this is transplant. Whether it is for up to 40, up to 60 or up to 75. The survival benefit is in all age group, dialysis is inferior to transplant. Transplant gets much better quality and longevity of life. Some about the immunosuppression drugs. Immunosuppressive drugs are important for a successful transplant. They have to be taken for the chronic period and long-term lifetime. There are multiple drug regimens which are available for the transplant, and initially the doses are very high, first 3 to 6 months, the doses are very high. Once that crucial period is over, the drugs are gradually tapered off. Chronic immunosuppression can lead to complications like malignancy, infections. They have their own side effects. Nowadays, we have drug minimizing regimes. Initially, we used to use triple drug, but after 3 to 6 months, now we come down to double drug therapy. Usually, steroids are minimized or withdrawn. This induction therapy, which we call anti-thymocyte globulins, are widely used nowadays. They are the very costly medicines, but immediately after transplant or pre-transplant, if we give a large bolus, long-term chances are very less and long-term requirements less. There are certain side effects which I would like to show you about the steroids. The side effects like hypertension, cholesterol increase, bone diseases, intolerance to the steroid, acidity, cataracts, impaired growth, increased glucose, dermatological infections like striae, pimples. These are the side effects of the steroids. The other commonly used drugs like cyclosporin and tacrolimus, they can cause kidney toxicity, neurotoxicity, hirsutism like increased hair growth, gum hypertrophy, hypertension, dyslipidemia, and glucose, increased sugar. These are the side effects of the commonly used drugs like tacrolimus and cyclosporin. And a word about induction immunosuppressive therapy. These are the used in first 1 to 3 weeks post-transplant. These are costly injection. Usually they cause T-cell antibody suppression. So because of this, we can have a very less chances of rejection and a successful graft survival and rejection-free graft survival. In patients who are having cadaver donor, sometimes we are not able to give tacrolimus or cyclosporin. In that, this is very helpful. It is only drawback. It is very expensive, and there are higher chances of risk of infection and malignancy. So we have to select each patient when we want to give this and give a proper dose so that they don't get any complication. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take any questions if you have.
Thank you, Doctor. I would request you to stop sharing the screen. Right. So here we are back. I have a few questions related to the presentation. So let's begin with the question answers. The first question is, what is ABO incompatible transplant? Although you've explained this, will it involve more medication? How is it superior to swap transplant?
ABO, like usually O recipient can take only from O. Okay. Otherwise, other groups, like if it is a blood group A, they can take from A or O. O is a universal donor. If it is B, take from B and O. But suppose I have a donor who is B group and if blood group is A. So then I cannot have A and B, which is because they are not compatible. As soon as we put a B kidney into the A patient, the A would have a preformed anti-B antibodies. So as soon as you put this kidney, the kidney will be rejected because of this preformed anti-B antibodies. So if we want to do this B group transplant to the A group patient, it is called across ABO or ABO incompatible transplant. If we want to do this, we have to remove these B antibodies from the patient. So for this, we have to give certain medicines. Almost 15 days prior to transplant, we give injection called rituximab, which will prevent new antibody formation. Then we do plasmapheresis. About 7 to 10 days prior to the transplant, we start the plasmapheresis depending upon the B titer and remove this B antibody from the body. And then once the B titer goes below 16, we go ahead and do the transplant. After transplant, the amount of drugs required or amount of medicine required will be similar to the same group transplant. There will be difference. There will be no increase in the medicine required after transplant, but before transplant, we will require extra treatment in the form of plasmapheresis and rituximab.
Okay, and doctor, it's also there in the question itself. Is it superior to swap transplant?
In swap transplant, you have to wait long. It is not superior to swap transplant. If you get a swap kidney, because in O group and ABO group, it is not possible to get a swap kidney. Because if I have a family member who has an O group, I would prefer to give in my kidney because I'm a universal donor. So a recipient with a O group would not be getting a swap kidney. Similarly, AB group. If it is a AB group, it will be universal acceptance. He is universal recipient. So he will also not get a swap kidney. It is only possible with A and B.
Right.
I mean, A and B, the waiting is too long and the procedure is too long. So most of the time what happens is if the anti-A or anti-B titer is very less, people prefer to go ahead and go for the ABO transplant rather than waiting too long for the swap kidney turn.
Right. So basically it's a time thing that is...
the time thing and the procedural time.
So the next question we have is, what is the acceptance range of HLA match for donation?
Better the match, better is the long-term survival, but it is not required. If you don't have a match, if you have a zero match, it is not required. It is possible to do a transplant. Only thing is your long-term requirement of the drugs would be a little higher. If you have a good match kidney, we can start tapering immunosuppression very early. In first 3 months, we can start reducing, and end of 6 months or 1 year, we are on very minimum immunosuppression if we know that the kidney match was very good. But if it is a non-match or less match, then we would like to keep immunosuppression a little longer.
Okay, so the next question we have is, why do we need 2 cross-match tests for non-related donors, and 3 cross-match tests for blood-related donors? Not quite sure about this, but yeah.
Nothing like that. It is similar, whether it is blood-related or not related. The cross-match test would be similar. There is no difference.
So, does that affect a transplant if a certain person is, non-related or related? I mean, I've heard a lot of people say this, or it's a misconception or whatever it is, but I have heard people telling this, that if you have a related donor, the transplanted kidney lasts longer. I'm not sure about it, but yeah. Is it because of the HLA matching?
If it is a related donor, like if you have a brother, sister, or a mother, then automatically your HLA match is going to be better.
Better, yeah.
Because it is from the same genes which we are going to get. So if it is mother and father, it is always 50%. It is not possible to have a 100% match in father or mother. It is going to be one haplo or 50% match. Whereas when it is siblings, if you have a brother or sister, it would be ranging from 0 to 100. It can be 100% match, it can be 75%, 50% or 0%. So that will range. So whenever there is a related donor, the match is going to be good. And when it is unrelated, the match is going to be less possible. But it is not that sometimes you can get 100% match in unrelated. Though it is unusual or rare, but it can happen.
Right, doctor. Thank you. Thank you so much. So the next question that we have here is, how should we prepare and maintain hygiene in a transplant recipient?
Transplant recipient hygiene is very, very important, because once it is a new kidney is put, only thing which we are worried about is the infection, because you don't have any disease now. You had only kidney disease, which has been taken care of. Your cardiac and other things are already taken care of before transplant. So now the only disease which you are worried about is the infections, and infections can be prevented by a good hygienic condition. So the hygiene, as far as our daily routine is concerned, routine hygienic bathing daily twice or what, but more important than is your room hygiene, your environmental hygiene, your food hygiene. That is more important. So you should have a well ventilated, good airy room. You should open the windows in the morning when the good sunlight is there. Clean your room twice with the phenyl, and then close the windows. Better to have AC. Try to avoid air cooler. Better to have a single toilet and for yourself separate. And food is most important. Food, you should have a fresh foods. Better to take cooked food. When you are taking vegetables and fruits, it should be well cleaned properly. Wherever possible, peel them and eat them. So this helps.
So, doctor, how long is this kind of hygiene supposed to be maintained? I mean, for how long after post-transplant?
First month, it is very crucial. After first month, the number of medicines keep reducing, but first 3 months, still the doses are very high. After 6 months, the doses come down very less. So then you can be a little bit more casual. But after 3 months, we allow the patients to start their work. They can go to their offices, start everything. After 3 months, the relaxation can be started. But there are certain lifestyle, certain hygiene we have to maintain lifetime.
Throughout our life. Okay. Okay, so doctor, the next question is it recommended to have a kidney transplant during pandemic, during these times?
It is a very biased kind of opinion. Everyone will have a different opinions. Because if you see, in pandemic, dialysis is also becoming difficult sometimes. And
Yes.
Going to dialysis, getting infections because of the dialysis. If you get an infection, getting availability of dialysis unit with the COVID unit is also a problem. And we don't know how long it is going to last. If we would have known that it is 1 month or 2 months, yes, we could wait. But now if it is more than 6 months, the complications on dialysis keep on increasing. Whereas with proper precautions and with proper, lot of now protocols are there, how to go about transplant in COVID era. So we have a very well established science in pandemic, how to go for transplant. And yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you, doctor, for that answer. The next question we have with us is that, is there any age limit for a transplant? How to get or apply for a kidney if not available in relatives?
There is no age limit as such. There are certain patients who are at the age less than 50 also have a lot of diseases and a lot of other problems. Though your physical health is more important rather than your age as age. So other patients who are fit at 75, they are transplantable. But there is a patient who is 55 but not otherwise physically fit, we cannot do transplant. So age limit is not there. Your physical health is more important, and other organs which are associated problems like cardiac problem, associated pulmonary problem, that is not there, age is not a limit. And if you don't have a living donor in your family who can donate, you can be on a cadaver donor waiting list. Now we have a very good cadaver donor waiting list system. We have a National Organ Transplant Authority. We have a state organ transplant authorities which are taking care of the cadaver list, and the things are getting very well organized. So best way is to be on dialysis and wait on the cadaver list.
Right. Thank you, doctor. So here we see that the doctor said that, it's not, the age is not the answer, the health is. I mean, it depends on the person to person. If a person is healthy and is also off age limit, they can also be receiving or donating a kidney. So let's go to the next question, and it is here asked that what is the criteria for unrelated transplant? Why are some centers denying it while the other doing it? And is autistic donor allowed?
See, the Human Organ Transplant Act, which we call HOTA, it is by the center. And then it is implemented by each state. So the act is formed in the center and each state has implemented with some variation. But the basic crux of the act is same everywhere. So one state is doing and other is not doing is not possible. It is everywhere same. It will vary from patient to patient because the act says it has to be the near relative which can donate. If the near relative is not medically fit, the hospital authorization committee will take the case, and if they feel that yes, this is a genuine case and the donor which is coming forward in an extended family or from the altruistic is not for any kind of financial transaction. If they feel that it is actually altruistic and there is no financial transaction, they will put forward your case to the state authorization committee, which will then assess your case completely. And if then they feel that yes, this is a altruistic donor and genuinely this patient does not have anybody in the family who can donate, and state authorization committee then permits, then it is possible. But most of the hospitals would not like to do that. They would say, we don't want to put forward the case to the state authorization committee. We don't do this kind of cases. We just do living donor. This is what is common scenario, though it is not the law.
Yeah, and it's also very complicated to, prove that there is no financial transactions going on. Even if, there is somebody who's willing to donate outside family without any, financial aid. So that is also very difficult to prove, because I myself have been through this. Like, I got 4 people tested in my family and none of them were a match. So we wanted to go for somebody who was willing to, donate the kidney out of sympathy and not due to financial requirement. But it was very difficult to prove that he is or she is not taking any sort of money, or there is no sort of transaction going on between 2 people. So that is one complication that has been there for people who do not have a matching donor in the family.
And most of the hospitals don't want to put the case forward. They don't want to go into that. They would say, we don't do this, you go to the other hospitals.
Because a lot of doctors have their reputation on stake, so they don't want to take a chance there. What if in future, it turns out to be a financial transaction? So that will cause a whole lot of buzz. Okay, so thank you, doctor, for that answer. So the next question we have is, can a transplant patient get an influenza vaccination, inactive or killed? If taking vaccination is important and safe.
Yes, yes. Influenza vaccine is very safe. Inactive or killed vaccine, it should be taken every year. There would be some mild flu-like symptoms in few of the patients, but it is safe. It is recommended to take.
Okay, so you say that we can definitely go for it. Right. So the next question we have is, what are the chances of success in a second kidney transplant? Well, this is one of my questions also.
Chances of success are very good. We have to look for the panel reactive antibodies. We have to see for the HLA band. And if we have no sensitization, which is like second transplant, the only thing which we are worried about is the sensitization, which is seen in 10 to 20%. 80% would not have any sensitization. And we can go up to 7 transplant. Second or third is nothing. It is possible.
Right. So basically it is the match that we need to find, the correct match.
We do the matching, and if it is matching is there, then we are not. It is same as the first transplant. But if there is a sensitization, if there is already preformed antibodies, then whatever procedure and whatever treatment we have to do, we have to do. But it is possible even in sensitized patient also.
Yeah, like because of the transplant, because of the first transplant, the body gets a lot sensitized. So the antibodies are already high. What criteria are we looking for in the second transplant for a match? It should that apart from the blood group match, we should also look for HLA match, and also for a PRA test. What exactly are we looking at?
PRA is most important. So panel reactive antibodies. So once you are sensitized, if you are matched with 100 donors, you would be finding only 20 who are matching with you. 80 would not match because you have already preformed antibodies. So this PRA can vary from 5% to 100%. So some would have sensitization of only 5%. Others would have sensitization up to 100%. So higher the PRA, lesser your chances of getting a newer donor. So PRA, once the patient is a very high PRA, then getting a better match is difficult.
Right. So in case of a second transplant, is cadaver donor advisable?
If you are high PRA, your getting a cadaver donor is also less. Then you get a different slot. If you have a sensitized host, you get a preference in the cadaver list. Yeah. You get extra points.
Thanks. Right. Okay. Thank you, doctor. So the next question is immunosuppressant drugs lifelong?
Yes, they are lifelong.
And can kidney transplant patient exposed to sunlight?
See, our skin, Indian population, if we are looking at, is not all that sensitive as compared to the white, mainly Australia and other, where the radiation is, UV radiation is in a very different angle, and the skin also is different. So they see very high chances of skin cancers. We see hardly any. We don't see much. But in certain ethnic group, the skin cancers are very common. So in that country, in those countries, they have to take care of the sunscreen lotions. and exposure to sunlight has to be avoided. But in our country, it is not. We have not seen any.
Okay. So we have the next question here. I'm 17 years old and surprised I've not been considered for a transplant. My doctor assured me it's good to be on dialysis. Is there any medical reason why I can't get a transplant?
It is 17 years is not a thing which is for contraindication, but you must be having some neurological problems, some bladder issues, or maybe your basic disease, like there are certain glomerular diseases like C3GN or HUS, which is a typical HUS, wherein there is a very, very high chance of coming back into the new kidney. Or if your urinary bladder is not functioning well, if you are not having a outflow, the bladder capacity is very small. There are so many other reasons wherein the transplant is not possible if you have oxalosis. So there are certain conditions which are there in young ages only. And because of those reasons, the doctor might say that, yes, you are not fit for transplant. Or if you are having a very low weight, your weight is also a very important criteria. We usually go by 25 kg is the minimum required weight before we go for transplant.
So with this question, there's also another question, which is it safe for a kid to get transplant if the child is below 10 years? And what are the risks involved?
As I said, age is not very important. Like if we usually prefer that when we are going for a major surgery,
okay,
height, length, and weight. These are the most important things. So usually the criteria is 25 kg should be the minimum weight before we go ahead and do the transplant. Before that, we would like to put the patient kid in on a CAPD if it is a very small child. And if it is a child which where HD is possible, we would like to put him in on hemodialysis. Nutritionally built mom. Infections are otherwise very high if we do it in very young age and very low weight, very fragile condition. So we have to build up nutritionally. The weight has to be at least about 25, then we can go ahead. Age would not be the actual criteria.
Okay, so age is not a criteria. Also, doctor, I had seen this case wherein a child was a CKD patient, an ESRD patient, sorry, before, I mean, he was like 8 years or something, and then he went on for dialysis for a few years. The growth of the child was actually not normal. I mean, not as compared to the rest of us.
That's why I'm saying the age is not a limit. If you don't do transplant in a proper age, that growth spurt which is there, that is, so you lose, even if you do the transplant afterwards, you lose that growth benefit.
Right.
So there are two growth spurts. One is at the age of around 8 to 10 years, then it is at the total age growth. So these are the spurts when you should be having normal chemistry in your body. So at that time, if you are transplanted, your hormones and everything comes back to normal. So you would get a better advantage of getting a good growth and normal growth.
So basically, it's not like if you're above a certain age or below a certain age, it's about the physical, capabilities of the person, like age, weight, and apart from the age, a lot of other things are also considered. So that should be a criteria for a transplant rather than the age. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So the next question is, my bladder has become small due to long time on dialysis. Will it disqualify me from a transplant?
No. It will not. If it is like before you go into the end-stage kidney disease, if your bladder was normal, because at present you are not producing urine, the bladder would look a little smaller. But if it was normal and if there is no bladder pathology, usually small capacity bladder, as the urine starts getting accumulated, this gradually increase. We might have to give some medicines initially. But if it is really, really small capacity bladder, because of the pathology of bladder itself, then we have to do a surgery, augment it. There are certain surgeries available to increase the bladder size. We make an intestine loop on the bladder and increase the size of the bladder. Or we can do hydrodistension. There are certain surgeries available to increase the bladder size. It is not a contraindication. Bladder size is never a contraindication for the surgery. There are treatment available.
It will not really affect the transplant, right? Thank you, doctor. So the next question is, after transplants, how much weight can we lift? This is one of the questions that I hear, and a lot of
First 3 months of the transplant, when the wound healing is still ongoing, we always tell that, okay, don't take too much of it. But once initial wound healing is over, first after 3 months of transplant, whether it is donor or a recipient, you can lift as much as weight you want to. It's a good exercise.
So that is not weightlifting is allowed, right?
Yes, yes. Unless you have other complications like you have a cardiac problem, hernias or something, which prohibit you from the weightlifting. Kidney transplant per se would not prohibit you for the this.
Right. So the next question we have is, how successful is simultaneous pancreas and kidney transplant?
Not very successful, but yes, every new therapy, every therapy which is upcoming has a learning curve. It is improving. The results are getting better and better day by day. And it is done very commonly now in Western world. In India, it is picking up, but it is still not very successful, but it is better than before.
So the next question we have is, to reduce the PRA, my doctor has suggested removing my spleen. Is it safe to go for the surgery?
It is a major surgery, but nowadays we do laparoscopic splenectomy. It is possible. If otherwise your health is good, it's not a very major surgery. You can go. Like if we can go ahead with transplant, which is a major surgery, same way splenectomy also is a similar. So it is possible.
Okay. So the next question is a lengthy question here, wherein I am 7 years post kidney transplant. Before my transplant, the transplant coordinating team explained the risk factors of transplant, importance of completing 1 month, 6 months, and then a year. Over time, the risk of rejection will become less. Then someone told me that post 5 years of transplant, risk factor will be very minimal. Now, recently I am told reaching 10 years of transplant is very crucial. Please explain the risk factors and how many years post-transplant can I be a little relaxed as if the risk period will be over?
See, basically it is the stages of transplant. If your 1 month goes without any problem, your chances of getting 6 months without problem increase. If your 6 months go without problem, your chances of getting 1 year without problem increase. After 1 year, it is a stage of 5 years. After 5 years, it is 10 years. So as the stage you pass, your chances of getting into the next stage is better. But if you say it is zero risk, it is not going to be there. It is a lifetime risk, but the risk goes on reducing.
So basically, it is that every 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, we should be a little more cautious than the other years.
Your chances of getting any complications go on reducing.
So we have another question, which is side effects of immunosuppressives after certain years. What are the side effects?
I showed you the slide in steroids mainly. That's why we prefer to minimize the steroids. Steroid is the most, it is the least expensive drug. It is only maybe in paisas, like 1 rupee, 2 rupee tablets. But the side effects are maximum with steroids because it can cause bone problems, it can cause cataract, it can cause skin problems, hirsutism, striae, acne, it can cause high sugar, it can increase your cholesterol, lipids, it can increase your weight, it will cause a lot of hunger. So a lot of side effects of the steroid, but in a proper dose with proper minimization, it is the most safest drug. Safest drug. Yeah, it is most effective drug. So it has to be used rationally. It is very good drug. Then is the cyclosporin and tacrolimus, which are very, very wonderful drugs. After the cyclosporin and tacrolimus, the transplant has become now cakewalk. What we used to do transplant, the survival was 60%, 65% has gone to 95% because of these medicines. So every medicine when we take, it has its own side effects. But if we see the risk and benefit ratio, the benefits are so high that these risks are negligible. And we have no choice. If we see, we have no choice. Because if we stop tacrolimus or if we stop steroid, the kidneys are going to reject. So we have to see the balance between how much is the minimum required and which will not cause infection, and how much is maximum required, which will prevent rejection. So that balance is very crucial. So which we have to do by trial and error.
Right. So related to this, there's another question wherein a patient has asked us if, there are different immunosuppressants, for example, cyclosporine, tacrolimus, and everolimus. Why different patients are given different drugs? What is the criteria? Why are they subject to?
Patients, most of the centers, they prefer nowadays 3 main drugs: steroid, CNI, and antimetabolite. That is, steroid is prednisolone. CNIs are either cyclosporine, tacrolimus, or everolimus. Either of these 3, one is chosen. So tacrolimus is the one which is nowadays 90% of the time it is chosen, because it is more cost effective, more easy to manage, and very less side effect in the 3. But in patients who are having diabetes, patients who are having hepatitis C virus, patients who are like pediatric, wherein cyclosporine suspension is available, whereas in tacrolimus the suspension liquid form is not available. So in those selected group, instead of tacrolimus, we prefer cyclosporine. Tacrolimus is much more potent than cyclosporine. So those who are having viruses in the body, those who are having BK poliovirus, CMV virus, we want to come down on immunosuppression. So tacrolimus is switched to cyclosporine. If patient has a HUS or something like this, we can go to cyclosporine, or sirolimus is then preferred. Those who are having elderly donors or extended criteria donor in the cadaver, in that cyclosporine and tacrolimus is not chosen, but everolimus is a better drug. So we have to select these drugs depending upon the patient's need. So it is not like one patient, one regime kind of. It has to be tailor-made.
Yeah, I remember I was put on cyclosporine initially, but my jaws had started to, grow. There were a lot of side effects. So my doctor had to then switch on to tacrolimus then. Right. So there's this another question which is related to this answer. If the donor is old, what are the chances of the recipient's survival or the new, kidney longevity?
So if the donor is old, the life of the kidney is going to be shorter. It is not the life of the patient. The kidney may not last you for, as we expect, for 18 to 25 years or more than that. These kidneys might last for 5 years or 10 years. Afterwards, you are back to dialysis and you have to go for the second transplant. Life is not at risk, but the kidney's life would be limited.
Okay, and with that, I would take a last question, which is, does the number of years on dialysis affect the success of a deceased donor transplant?
Number of years on dialysis would not affect your deceased donor success if you are taking certain precautions, like as you are knowing that you are going to go on a transplant someday in the future. So you should avoid blood transfusions. You should try and see to that you take optimum erythropoietin. You should have adequate dialysis. If your dialysis is not properly adequate for a long term, your cardiac condition, your pulmonary conditions become so weak that you are not then fit for transplant. So long term you are on dialysis, you should have a very good quality dialysis, avoid any kind of infections, avoid blood transfusions, eat very well nutritious diet, and maintain yourself well on dialysis. Then the complications are not there, even if you are going for transplant after 10 years. But if your dialysis is not adequate, if your quality of dialysis is not good, if you are getting repeated infections, repeated blood transfusions, then it is going to definitely affect your transplant.
So in case if a person is planning for a transplant, they should go for a single use, dialyzers.
3 times a week is most important. First thing, adequacy of dialysis is most important. Single use if possible, yes, because most common chances of getting infections are in the wash area. So that's why. Otherwise, adequacy of dialysis up to 3 or 4 uses are good. It is not right. The adequacy which is suffered, but the chances of getting infections are higher if you are using reused dialyzer.
Right. So that's all for today. And on behalf of our community, I would like to thank Dr. Sonal for a valuable time. That was really, really nice of you, Doctor, to give us such an important information and also answer all our queries so patiently. And you definitely have taught us a lot of things today. And we people here on the forum will definitely now will be more open to transplant than before. Thank you so much for your time, Doctor.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting, and I would be very happy for any kind of questions or queries. I'll be very happy to take them. Thank you.